All right, good morning. It is March 11th, first day back after town meeting week, and we are diving back into S44. Some discussion and a possible vote here next 20 or 30 minutes. And we basically completely changed the bill and condensed it down to essentially one paragraph. And we have site council here, if they want to join us and just give us the walkthrough one more time of the substance of what we turned this bill into, and then we can have a discussion.
Good morning. Rick Sable, office with the council. I will share my screen here so you all can have a view of the amendments. I have 20 Word documents open, so make sure I've got the right ones. It's that.
You're something done, huh?
377. Yeah, so the numbers are all very close together. It's not ideal. Here we go. This is correct. Okay, so this is still draft 1.1 of the proposed committee amendments to S44. No changes since the last time I walked you all through the amendments. You may remember we are in Title 20. No, serious. We are in Title 20, Section 4652. Under current law, the governor, upon consultation with the Vermont Attorney General, is authorized to enter into these two agreements, 8 U.S.C. 1357, also known as 287G agreements, or 19 U.S.C. 1401I. So the proposed amendment would strike through subsection B, which currently allows a state, county, or municipal law enforcement agency to enter into one of these two agreements when necessary to address threats to the public safety or welfare of Vermont residents arising out of a declaration of a state or national emergency. Again, that's current law. The proposal is to strike that and clarify that no state, county, or municipal law enforcement agency or officer shall enter into one of these agreements unless the governor authorizes it as set forth in subsection A. And then section 2 just updates the title of the bill to reflect these changes. So that is
Just to clarify, when entering into agreements, I think it's under 19 U.S.C. 1401, which is, I believe, the Customs and Border Protection. Currently, if towns or the state police or any agency want to enter into an agreement, do they currently have to go through the administration to get approval to enter into that agreement?
Oh, so under current law, now I don't know if let me first say that I'm not sure how often at all this is happening. How these local law enforcement agencies are entering into these, but the current law would seem to require that the governor must authorize it first. But I think the reason why this was added is paragraph B was to ensure that it is abundantly clear that you must have the governor's authorization before you can enter one of these. So I can't directly answer your question as to is this happening, but it should not be based on the text of the current law.
And okay, that's fine. Outside of a host.
The way I read this, it only applies to law enforcement. It would not apply to any other state agency. As I mentioned sort of early in the conversation around this, I have concerns around other state agencies like DCF. So is that a correct reading of this?
Right. So subsection B makes it clear just pertaining to law enforcement and officers, correct? Now, going back to my previous statement, is subsection A makes it fairly clear that the governor, only the governor, can enter into these agreements. So if you want to, further clarify and add additional state agencies, you could in subsection B. Kind of up to the committee.
So just so I'm fully understanding, even though it's not listed, for example, DCF, if they wanted to, for whatever reason, enter into an agreement with CBP or ICE, they do have to go to the governor's office, but it's just not written.
Well, I think subsection A makes it pretty clear that only the governor, right, can enter into these agreements. Now, if DCF decides to go rogue, I guess, quote unquote, and enter into one of these agreements without the governor's approval, could they be stopped? I don't know, right? That's not something I can testify to. However, the law makes it pretty clear that only the governor can do this. And I think the reason for subsection B is just further clarify that. But I'll contradict myself. If you further clarify something, then you're creating loopholes potentially.
Right. Right. That's not one.
So it's as simple as we've just made this so it covers everything, and we've eliminated declaration of state for national emergency. So this pertains to any federal entity. Period. So we're talking about here.
Let's reread the first part of the question, make sure I understand correctly.
So the only difference I could see is under B, where it's been stricken. We've added, they both start with no state, county, or municipal law enforcement shall enter an agreement pursuant to the governor's approval, right? But it does not say after a declaration of state or national emergency. So what we've done is simply have eliminated the declaration, and it's pretty simple now.
That's correct.
All agreements have to go.
That's correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and that's a good point that, currently you could have DCF for some other state agency if there's a local or national emergency. Now, only right under current law, we're removing language that is currently in law. Currently, if you have a law enforcement agency or officer acting under a national or state emergency, then yes, they would not be the governor's approval. DCF would not be able to, under my understanding of this. But because the way it's written, subsection B now does potentially create some, maybe not the most clarity as to other state agencies, departments.
Yeah, I'm realizing this now is if we're making it clear that in a national emergency, law enforcement cannot enter into an agreement with federal government or ICE or CBP, but we are not talking about these other agencies. If they're being left out, the question could arise in a courtroom as, the legislature is specifying that it's law enforcement that this applies to, but they're silent on DCF or DOC. So I'm wondering then if there needs to be if subsection B just doesn't need to exist, and we just need to put in subsection A to clarify that even in a state of emergency, all entities must still go to the governor's office. I don't know if that makes it better and potentially closes any loopholes.
Yes, or you can also change subsection B, the current proposed language still happens. Great things to go. But say, state entities, kind of make broader, basically no governmental unit of Vermont. However that's worded. Shall enter into one of these agreements. That's your second option.
No entity shall enter into those agreements unless they are authorized by the government.
Right.
I do think that makes more sense, because I do think that when law remains silent on certain issues, it could create loopholes. So
Yeah, and I'm just gonna show you here what I'm typing as I go.
It's your proposal to simply eliminate B.
Not quite. I think the proposal is to keep B, but to clarify that it is not just law enforcement. It is any state entity will be required to go through the governor in order to enter into any of these agreements.
Okay, we'll just go behind on line 18, no state agency.
It's on the screen.
Yes, Senator Norris, I made a quick little change here.
Oh,
And you probably don't need county or municipal, this state includes every state government. But again, to be clear,
Yeah, I'll go for the municipal.
The only question I have is in terms of conformity with other statutes, where we are specifically spelling it out. Because again, I don't want to enter that potential area where we are creating loopholes by specifically saying municipalities in one law or not saying them in another law. So is that highlighted section in line with what other statutes might say about entering into agreements?
if you give me 5-10 minutes
Yeah.
offline, I can double check that because you're right. We'll make sure it's the consistent language.
That sounds good. As long as it's consistent, I'd be fine with it. Committee, is there general thoughts on this change?
I don't have any opposition to it. So whatever, and state authorities. Let's just not.
Okay, that sounds good. Senator Baruch, just so you know, we're making some minor changes to this just to avoid some loopholes. Ledge Council is going to do some research for a little bit to get back to us. Okay. In the near future, so
This is S44.
that's pretty.
Okay. It's highlighted behind it.
Yeah, I just made a quick change to read.
And basically the gist of it, underlying issue, didn't want to create a specific carve out where we're talking about law enforcement, but not talking about DCF or DOC or other state agencies. Because sometimes when the law is silent on certain topics, it raises questions as to ambiguity. And so that's what we're trying to clarify here. We're just gonna make sure that it's consistent, and we'll come back with a copy and maybe vote later today or perhaps tomorrow. That's all good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll hang around. It might take me just, like I said, about 10 minutes.
So,
And you decide.
great. And I know that there were some other questions, not for you.
Okay.
But thank you.
Yeah, sure.
For Falco, sorry, some questions, concerns from Senator Mahosky. Falco, do you have a couple minutes?
Happy to get in the chair.
And also if you have thoughts on the bill in general and both of the changes that you started.
Yeah, so for the record, Falco Schilling, Advocacy Director at the ACLU of Vermont, I think first will speak to the proposed changes you just discussed. Those are things that we would support as the ACLU, and our testimony we highlighted our concerns about the current provision into the underlying statute, which would allow law enforcement to enter into these agreements if there was a declared state of emergency, either by the federal or state government. There have been states of emergency declared by the president, which some people could read to allow them the ability to enter these agreements without gubernatorial approval now, which is a concern. I don't think that the state of emergencies as declared should give that authority, but that doesn't mean that other people would not read them or read the statute in a way which is different from how we read them. Apart from that, I do appreciate the committee taking this up and moving this bill forward. I think above all, we would like to see this bill continue to move forward. We think this is an important change. And we also want to have more opportunities to have the proposals we put forward considered specifically as it relates to the underlying statute and information sharing between state entities and the federal government. And so the underlying bill speaks to a number of issues, specifically protected religious practice or personally identifying information. Our proposal is to add some categories in terms of limited information sharing, specifically folks accessing legally protected healthcare activities. So, things like abortion care, gender affirming care, folks engaged in protected First Amendment activity, which is becoming a rising concern as we see this administration is targeting individuals based on the content of their speech in protests or threatening elected officials with some sort of law enforcement investigation for simply providing folks know your rights trainings. We think that the state government should not be in the business of helping forward these types of investigations or potential prosecutions. And then beyond that, looking at trying to limit the information sharing from state entities outside of law enforcement when it comes to immigration enforcement, which should not be a priority under our state law, since it is not a violation of our state laws. All that said, I also understand where we are in the process and want to have time to have these proposals fully considered. So if it's something the committee wants to talk more about or is interested in looking at a proposal, more than happy to discuss that. But I think our number one concern is we want to see this bill move forward in some form. So there's at least an opportunity to have those conversations, whether it's in this committee in the future, whether it's with the House and then with this committee in the future. But we do think that these are pressing concern, and we think this bill is an opportunity to offer Vermonters more protections than they currently have now within the laws. And I think should clarify that we're not asking the state government anyway to violate federal law. We are simply asking them to prioritize what information they are sharing and the instances when they feel like that is appropriate or not.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, thanks for joining. Any committee, any questions for Malcolm? Okay, great. Thank you. Also note, I did reach out, it was about a week, maybe a week and a half ago, to the administration and the Department of Public Safety to see if they want to come in and testify again on this bill, or if they even just wanted to share their thoughts on it. I haven't received a response as it but we do have the AG, we have Todd Delos with us. If you want to provide any updates on any thoughts on the changes that we made.
Certainly. Thank you, Todd Delos, Attorney General's office. Very quickly, we support the change as it appears to have been drafted by Ledge Council. I think it's an important shift in the bill as it stands. Also happy to work with ACLU on some of the language they proposed in terms of information protection if and when the bill moves forward. Our one thought on that was ensuring that there's consistency within the language with the existing information shield law, which I think is 12 VSA, they wrote it down, 12 VSA 7306, and just wanted to make sure any proposed language that looks to focus on protecting information from being shared is congruent with the existing statute. And again, as I say, happy to work with Falco.
Thank you. Committee, any questions or comments for Todd? Thank you. So we need to give our executive council a little bit more time to finish up their work. So I think that we can hit the pause button for a couple of minutes, come back at 10:30 for S45, and once Ledge Council is ready with S44, we can shift gears and vote on that. So that we've done the discussion, so a vote I don't think is going to take much time. We can interrupt whatever we're doing in the next half